And they said, well, now that we got all of this occupation territory that we occupy, let's get rid of these Ashkenazi Jews. Let's get them out of Europe. I mean, we were having programs against them for 400 years. Let's get rid of them so we can keep it moving. So they came up with the Balfour Declaration and gave it to one of the richest families in European history, the Rothschilds. They didn't have nobody else to give it to. They didn't know who to give it to. So they called Home Slice from the Rothschilds. I forgot what first name he had. But a Rothschild is a Rothschild is a Rothschild. So they called him in there. They said, yo, here you go. Y'all got it. Homeland. And Theodore Herzl, an atheist, who didn't even believe in Judaism himself personally, said, cool, we're going to establish a Jewish homeland. The question was, well, where were you going to do this at? And there was a whole bunch of ideas. They was even talking about going to Africa. Say, man, let's go in Africa, knock them niggas out the box and get some territory. He said, man, we don't look like them. We're going to be in kind of a bad fix there, being the only white nation in the middle of Africa talking about we Jews. So, yeah, you got a point. So what about the Levant? What about Palestine? Yeah, that's right. That might work. All we got to do is wipe them out, and it's ours. Who going to stop us? So they began. Up until that point, up until 1923, Muslims and Jews lived in peace and harmony with each other in the Levant, in Palestine. And we could even go back further to the Andalusia, Spain, when the Moors, the Muslims controlled Spain for hundreds of years. Sephardic Jews, the Ashkenazis didn't exist yet. They hadn't taken their equivalent of a Shahada yet. And they hadn't migrated from the Caucasus Mountains regions of the Balkans yet. But the Sephardic Jews in Palestine enjoyed equality in the Muslim community of the Moors. They contributed to the culture and to the civilization of Moorish Spain. And then here come these crackers. Here comes the Spaniards and the Franks and the Goths and the Visigoths. All of these crackers from the north. And eventually by 1492, they had overran Spain. And the first thing that they did was establish the Spanish Inquisition. Everybody had to pledge allegiance to the Christian Pope, to Christianity, or otherwise they were going to be tortured and murdered as heretics and witches and warlocks. The Sephardic Jews were run out of Spain into North Africa and eventually into the Levant via Egypt and the Suez. But the Inquisition set a tone and a precedent for the treatment of perceived Jews historically in Europe. According to the Christian dogma and religion, the Jews killed Jesus. I mean, Jesus was a Jew, but it doesn't matter. They collaborated with Rome to slay their Savior that they call God. So the Christians had it in for Judaism. It was like they was on a permanent jihad when it came to the Jews. So by the time the Ashkenazis began to migrate from what is now the Baltic states, the Balkans, Eastern Europe, into Germany, and converted to Judaism, they were speaking Yiddish, sort of a bastard language contrived between Eastern European dialects and German. They just began to read the Torah in Hebrew, and they developed their religion and became hated by European aristocracy and European religious dogma and Christian dogma. And they were constantly terrorized. Pogroms were committed against their community and their family. Their children were murdered and butchered. Every time nobility had a problem or there was a crisis, let's go kill the Jews over there in the ghetto or over in the Jewish community. And they ride down on them and murder and terrorize them. So by the time of the Balfour Agreement, Europe has gotten tired of this. The empires were breaking up. There was a new industrial age that was blooming. So the British said, well, let's get this problem behind us. So they gave them the Balfour Agreement and said, you could go set up your own country. And I think that we know what happened. We know how after World War I, the seeds were set for World War II. The Germans surrender, the Germany's defeat led to the rise of a little short dude from Austria. I call him Austria Shorty, but everybody else calls him Adolf Hitler. Now this dude, I urge some of you to look at the old films of Adolf Hitler and his rise to power in the early 1930s after World War II. You could see this little animated guy, and he may look funny to us, but go read the translation of his German speeches into English. He was eloquent. He snatched the hearts of the German people with his rhetoric, and they believed in him. Some may say he was a reflection of the Dajjal. Might have been, the Lord knows best. But he galvanized the German people. He gave them jobs in a time when the Great Depression was sweeping the Western world. He gave the Germans full employment. He gave them food. He gave them, restored their pride. And he built their military. He built the strongest military in Western Europe under the very noses of the French and the British. And by 1938 and 39, he was ready to make his moves. He annexed the Sudetenland. Nobody said nothing. He moved in to other occupied areas that they gave up as a result of the Versailles Treaty, and nobody said nothing. He said, man, this is a walk in the park here. Ain't nobody trying to help nobody else. Let me go and do my thing. So he invaded Poland, and everybody got upset because they had allies and stuff with Poland. And so as we know it, World War II began. It was one of the most deadly conflicts in human history. Over 100 million people died during this war. 25 million or 27 million alone from the Soviet Union, which is now called Russia. The United States lost in that war a total of less than 500,000 soldiers. They paid the least price because the United States was never physically invaded. It became the war machine of the Allies. It produced all of the material for the war against Germany and then later against Japan and Italy. And I'm giving you this historical scope to set up for where we are at now. Because when the Allies won the war in 1945 and declared victory, remember that Balfour Agreement from the 1920s? Well, by then, 6 million or so Ashkenazi Jews were slaughtered by that little short guy from Austria. 6 million. And over 2 million Roma people. And another 2.5 million Slavic people. This dude was killing people on an industrial scale. Never before has humankind seen such mass murder on such a large scale. So the sympathy and the empathy of the entire Western world was on the side of the Ashkenazi Jews. So they had a free hand when they went back to Palestine and began to set themselves up. That one of the British, some of the British prime ministers were down with the Ergun gang that murdered and blew up British soldiers. I mean, these dudes were off the chain. Anything that moved that they didn't like, they was killing it and blowing it up. They negotiated with the Nazis to get professional Jews out of Europe at the height of the so-called Holocaust. They bought them to resettle them in Palestine. And this history is not a secret. And by 1948, the State of Israel was declared. And the first nation to recognize it was the one we're sitting in now, the United States. The United States had a plan. The Cold War was about to begin. In fact, it had begun by 1948. The Cold War had just begun, and the enemy was the former Soviet Union and China, so-called communist nations. So the United States had to set up its hegemonic power all across the region and the world. The United States revitalized Japan after bombing them into the Stone Age. After dropping 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, the United States occupied Japan and began to pump money into its former industrial families that had financed Japanese imperialism. And that's a whole nother story. Japanese imperialism was no joke. It was no joke. But you know what they used in order to conquer Asia? You know the ideology that they used? They used the hatred for the European colonists in Asia and India. They turned that hatred against the Europeans with the ideology and the slogan, Asia for the Asiatics. Asia for the Asiatics. Now, it doesn't matter that the Japanese was on some, we're going to run everything and kill everybody and everything's going to be about Japanese. But they knew that the people of Asia hated the French and hated the West. So some people said, well, better another Asian than these crackers, and help them. So the hatred of a people can be turned in a way that they defeat their own self-interest and don't even realize it. It's very important to understand how that could happen, because it's happening now, right before our eyes. It's happening to the Ummah. This is why our people are so silent. They were looking to regularize the relationship to the European settler state of Israel, normalize relations, set up trade, and they called it the Abraham Accords. They were ready to do this and kick the Palestinians under the bus. The Palestinians said, well, yo, I don't think that's going, man, we can't go out like that. So they launched Al-Aqsa Flood. And it changed the whole geopolitics of Western Asia. And today, it's throwing international law and international relationships into chaos. One action of an oppressed people for their human rights and their humanity has changed the geopolitical atmosphere of our time. It was a brilliant action. Took the Zionists completely by surprise. They didn't know what time it was. They were shooting each other. They were so scared. So they used that as an excuse, as a raison d'etre, as a reason to carry out the final phase of their occupation of Lebanon. And that was the total extermination and genocide of the Palestinian people. And this is what we're witnessing now. And what we're witnessing now is a continuum of all these events that I just laid out to you. History doesn't repeat itself, brothers and sisters, but it rhymes. And what are we rhyming with now? We're rhyming with a genocide of a European settler state that had occurred historically at least 4 or 5 times. This nation state is a European settler state, just like the state of Israel. It exterminated the indigenous and native people and put them on reservations and took their land.
That's right.
Not only did they take the land of the indigenous people here, they took some of the land of the Mexicans. Texas, California. Why do you think you call Los Angeles? You think that's in English? San Francisco? Is that English? Los Alamos, all of that stuff? Spanish. This used to be part of Mexico. And if we go into the history of this acquisition and war against the Mexican-American War, we'll see that after the conquest of these lands and the defeat of Mexico, came an American president named James Monroe, who said that everything in the Western Hemisphere was the backyard of the United States. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. No other country, no other power could have any influence in this area other than the United States. And the United States, under the Monroe Doctrine, began to exploit and rape the resources of Latin America and the indigenous people in Latin America. And this has went on for over a century, almost a century, until the lands of these people were devastated, until their lands were ravished by U.S. multinational companies and mineral companies. You know, United Fruit, some of the bananas we eat today. And the term Banana Republic comes from the ravages of the United States and Latin America. Haiti was occupied by the U.S., I believe, 2 or 3 times. Citibank got rich in Haiti, stealing the resources and the money of the Haitian people. So when we see migrants coming to the border, women carrying their babies on their back for 3,000 miles through jungle and swamp to get to the borders of Texas, looking for a life for their children and themselves, because back where they come from, the U.S. has ravaged and turned into a backwater nation. So they come here looking for a future. And these crackers are talking about their criminals and drug addicts and they're less than humans, and it's an invasion of white America. And then they turn you and me, the descendants of slaves and the families of migrants from Asia, from Africa, they turn us against them. And so they're threatening us. They're taking welfare grants away from us. They're opening up beauty salons and nail polish, nail saloons. Then they're taking the dollar out of our community. They twist the reality of imperialism and white supremacy around until they have us hating people who are just like us. This is how insidious this nation and its political and economic system is. So when we talk about understanding unity, when we talk about understanding what it means to be a Muslim, it means that we are aware and conscious of this history, and we will not continue down that road and perpetuate it. That we will stand up for the human rights of those migrants, just like we would stand up for the human rights of the Palestinian people. We will stand up for the human rights of the poor who are victimized by capitalism, who's homeless in a country of wealth, the most wealthy and powerful country on the planet. And there's almost 1 million homeless in the streets. We see it right here in LA. So it is our duty and obligation as Muslims to be in the forefront of the struggles that empower these people, because they empower us. That's right. And that's why I want to say and get to the point here, and this is going to hurt everybody. I went off on a tangent because I wanted everyone in here to understand that some of us have taken refuge in the deen. We have taken refuge in it from all of the worries and the stress of modern capitalist white supremacy. I remember when I first took my Shahada almost 50 years ago, that Muslims were struggling to get alternate side of the street parking on Friday. This was a struggle. Serious. If you brought your car to Juma, man, you might have a ticket on it after Salah. We had to fight and scuffle to get alternate side of the street parking. And then many migrant Muslims came to the U.S. And they got financing from the countries where they came from, whether it was Pakistan or wherever. And they built these beautiful masjids, brand new from the ground up. But the black folks who were Muslims here, all their masjids was in storefronts. Right. Empty supermarkets. And when the migrant Muslims came to the U.S., they used to look down on what we call indigenous Muslims, black Muslims. They used to look down on our struggle against white supremacy and for civil and human rights. They used to look down on these struggles against police brutality and say that these struggles were not feasibly allowed. So therefore they were not worthy of support. All of this happened until 9/11. Up until 9/11, Islam was the fastest growing religion in America. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember that. But before 9/11, Islam was listed as the fastest growing religion in the United States. After 9/11, man, we went from 90 to 0 in like no time. We became automatically terrorists. If you had a Muslim name, you was automatically on the terrorist list. They infiltrated our masjids. They set up our young people who showed discontent against U.S. foreign policy. So they were terrorists scheming to commit terrorism. And usually it was an FBI agent or some agent, police agent, that came up with the whole plan that was talking all the stuff. And some of these kids are still in prison today as we speak. So, they began to infiltrate our masjids, intimidate our imams so they would stand up and give these ridiculous khutbahs about how the system, we're Muslims and we have to obey the laws and we can't do this and we shouldn't do that. What happened? Our masjids didn't become a refuge from white supremacy and oppression. They became instruments of white supremacy and repression. They had us in the masjid snitching on each other. The imams were inviting police chiefs for iftar, sitting there kicking the woolly bobo with them.
Still are.
It's got so, man. I said, man, I ain't going to mosque no more, man. Yeah, I might get snitched on. Somebody might talk about, yeah, I heard him talking about blowing up the Statue of Liberty. You know, see if you get some more information out of it. And before I know it, police! Police? And the door comes off the hinges. Here come these crackers with machine guns and bulletproof vests dragging me off. And in the newspaper, Muslim terrorists plot foiled by New York Intelligence Bureau.
Not this again.
You say, oh, man, how did I get like this? What happened? You was making salat in that masjid, man. Boy, you didn't know what you was doing. You thought you was following your deen. You was part of the ummah. You was safe. You ain't safe. The only safety we have is in Allah. And so, we are here now. And genocide is being committed in the Sudan, in the Darfur. Over 10 million people, women and children, are facing imminent starvation in the Darfur. Why? Because the Arab regimes of the UAE, these family dynasties, the UAE, Qatar, and Egypt, are financing the former Janjaweed, so-called RBF, I think they're called. And they're Arab-speaking Muslims slaughtering non-Arab-speaking Africans. And they're financed under the table by guess who? Same ones that's financing the Israelis, the U.S. And why are these Arab regimes doing this in the Sudan? Because of the Abraham Accords. Because the purpose of the Abraham Accords was to regularize relationships and normalize relationships with Israel. Invest in Israel, have diplomatic relationships with Israel, and all of this stuff. And the key to that, of course, is the military. If you had a militant, anti-Israeli military, how could the government lead into a relationship of normalization with Israel? If you had a military that identified with the struggles of the Palestinian people or was sympathetic to the Iranian Revolution. No way. So you have to purge your military of any type of sentiment of solidarity with the Palestinian people and purge them of any type of hatred towards Israel. And the Sudan is part of that matrix. Look at the map and where Sudan sits, south of Saudi Arabia and UAE. So this is why the Arab-speaking Muslim Janjaweed are being used and financed to take control of the Sudanese state. Besides the fact that there's minerals and oil and stuff in the Sudan. So what I'm trying to say to you, that this enemy is the enemy of the sun. This enemy is the enemy of all humanity and all mankind. And most of all, this enemy is the enemy of Muslims. So now we have to call our comrades, our brothers and sisters who are not Muslim, who are in the streets organizing for the poor, who are in the streets organizing for the homeless, who are fighting against racism and misogyny and patriarchy and all of these different types of oppression. We have to call them to unity. They won't call themselves to unity. We have to make that call. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said that in the last days, the mosques would be full, but they would be devoid of leadership. Are the mosques full today? Yes. Do we have leadership? No. When the Iranian Revolution occurred in 1979, it took the CIA and the Western nations aback, took them by surprise. One minute they had the Shah Pahlavi, who was westernized, who had all of their military equipment, and they could depend on in Western Asia to hold down Western Asia against any type of Russian or Middle Asian influence. Between Israel and Iran, the United States felt they was good to go. Then all of a sudden, it seemed like overnight, the Shah is gone, overthrown, and an old cleric is getting off an airplane named Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in exile somewhere in Paris. This old man getting off the plane, there's damn near 1 million people at the airport to meet him, screaming and hollering and jumping up and this and that. What happened? Who's this guy? And he starts talking about Israel. First thing out of his mouth, he starts talking about Israel, got to go. He starts talking about the fake Muslim regimes, got to go. The U.S. said, whoa, something wrong here. The Shah's in the hospital, about to die, and this guy comes up talking about revolutionary guards and you overthrowing U.S. hegemony, and he's talking all this crazy stuff. So first of all, let's get some of them Ba'athists in Iraq, sick them on them, say, look, man, we give you some chemical weapons and give you some, some support. Just go ahead and wipe him on off. That didn't work. That war lasted for how long? 3-4 years? Iranians fought them to a standstill. I said, okay, that don't work. What are we going to do? Well, you remember Ali? Remember Kabbalah? You remember the rift between Sunni Islam and Shia? Well, they ain't even Arabs. They Shia. They're not Sunni. So they say to King Saud, well, you know, we got your back, man. You got to watch them Sunni, them Shia, man. They gonna come in here and take over Mecca. You talking about boss? What are you talking about? He ain't coming in here. Don't worry, we got your back. We're gonna set a little base up over here. Contrary to the Sunnah, where foreign soldiers are not supposed to be stationed in the Hijaz. They're not supposed to be on Islamic and Muslim soil. But it's okay, we get American airborne units in here, drones and all of this. It's all good. We got you, King Saud. We got you. You and the family, don't even worry about it. Just keep that oil flowing, and we're going to make sure that these crazy Persians don't do nothing stupid. So, here we are today. The Saudis, well, we know where the Saudis are. And we have to ask ourselves, we have to search the hadiths and the sunnah to find out what are we going to do with these people. They're the keeper of the holy places. They're also keeper of U.S. hegemony and imperialism. How do you reconcile that? You don't. And everybody knows the hadiths about the last days and the black flag and the bakah. We all know that. We keep it away from white folks when we can, and from these crackers. We don't think that we anti-quote Semitic. You know the hadith where every bush and every tree screams out, there's a Jew behind me, kill him. And that's anti-Semitic. But he can't be really anti-Semitic because the Ashkenazis are not Semites. The real Semites are the Palestinians. So when we think about it, Zionism is anti-Semitic. Because it's killing, these are Europeans killing Semites. But they done flipped the script, and if you try, you gotta give them credit now. I mean, you gotta give them, that's some slick, man, listen. Con game like that, you couldn't learn in the South Bronx or Holland. You couldn't learn no big game like that. Now you see it, now you don't. So where did it go? It's right here. Oh! they got it. They got us, they got folks believing that they the Semites and the Palestinians are what? They're from the planet Mongo? Who are the Palestinians? If you Semitic and you Ashkenazi and you were speaking Yiddish before you came here, you from the Ukraine, you from Poland, you from, they from here. You know they forbid DNA tests in Israel. You know that, right? If you take a DNA test in Israel, you're going to jail. If you take a DNA test, I thought I just learned that just a few weeks ago. Somebody would have told me this. I said, that's not true. You exaggerate. But it's true. Because they know they have no connection to Western Asia and Palestine. Imam Jamil Al-Amin said, and I'll never forget this one day when he was talking, he said, Akhi, all that's not real is camouflage. All that's not real is camouflage. I thought about that for years, and he's right. They camouflaged themselves and said, God gave us this land. This was promised from God. So anything we do, it's all good with God. And you and your international law, that don't matter because it's in God's hands. You see? This is our land. But don't take a DNA test. Because that's against God's decree. You see? So, I want to say to those amongst us who are who are hesitant about alliances with people whose lifestyle is not Islamic. Alliances and political alliances and united fronts doesn't mean that you give up your deen. It doesn't mean that you necessarily endorse another person's lifestyle. What it does mean that you are in an alliance based on principle. And this alliance principle that you are urged to fight oppression. And those who fight oppression with you are your allies. And that's the bottom line. And that's one of the reasons that I really felt honored to come and talk to young Muslims like yourselves. You have so much potential. The movement for human rights to save this planet from the ravages of greed and piracy and criminals is your duty. This is your struggle. This is your chance to show